Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. My name is John Green, and I'm the Vice President for Partnership Engagement for the Ignatian Volunteer Corps. It's a pleasure to be with all of you for our first National Information Session. All of this has been made possible by our hardworking staff at IVC, by the generosity of our university and college partners, the AJCU, Alpha Sigma Nu, the Ignatian Collaborators, and America Magazine, who has featured our impact report in their latest edition, and this information session was advertised on the back cover. During this session, I will introduce you to IVC with the hope that you will walk away with a sense of who we are and the knowledge that we have a place for you if you feel called to serve. I will also introduce you toward the end of the session to some IVC members who can share some stories about their experience. But before all of that, I'd like to start by introducing you to a very special guest who has been a friend to IVC for some time. Father James Martin is a Jesuit priest, editor-at-large of America Media, consultor to the Vatican's Dicastery for Communication, and author of many books, including the New York Times bestsellers, The Jesuit Guide, which is a personal favorite of mine, Jesus a Pilgrimage, and Learning to Pray. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, John. Great to be with you and happy to support IVC any way that I can.
Well, it's wonderful to have you here. Really appreciate it. And I think what might be a good start to get us started off is I think our viewers might want to hear a little bit about you and your story as it pertains to service, what your experience has been like, and if you wouldn't mind sharing some of that with us.
No, not at all. I mean, very briefly, I didn't do any service really before I entered the Jesuits in 1988. And then my Jesuit formation took me to places like I worked with hospital patients. This is in Cambridge, Massachusetts, seriously ill hospital patients, where I really learned how to treat people not like categories or stereotypes, but individuals. I worked with homeless men and women. I worked for 4 months with Mother Teresa's sisters in Kingston, Jamaica, who brought in people from off the streets. You know, always people kind of on the margins, which is a lot of the people that IVC volunteers work with. I worked with street gang members during my philosophy studies at Loyola Chicago. And then for 2 years, maybe the most sustained period was with East African refugees in Nairobi, Kenya, helping them start small businesses. And then in theology studies with prison inmates, and then most recently with LGBTQ people. But, you know, really, I think the lesson I learned mainly was to treat them as individuals with individual stories and needs and backgrounds rather than just kind of stereotypes. And I have to say, I know, you know, I don't want to plug it too much, but I'm also what's called a reflector for IVC, which means that I accompany an IVC volunteer and hear about her ministry, which has really been fascinating. And I know, I just need to say it, IVC is one of the great things that the Jesuits have done, and along with their colleagues, of course, in the last 25 or 50 years. And I think it's wonderful we're having this seminar because I think it's still kind of an untapped resource. And when I explain IVC to people, they say, "You're kidding, that sounds perfect. I'd love to join." So it's so wonderful that we have so many people who are interested in service in the Ignatian way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so you got to 1988 with no service, and then it would sound like you made up for lost time. So
yeah, thanks to the Jesuits.
I guess we all have them to thank. So I have been part of IVC as employed by IVC for about 3.5 years. And I knew you were a big supporter of us before then. When did that start? Like, when did you first hear about us and jump on board?
You know, I mean, being a Jesuit and in the Society of Jesus, I heard about it as soon as it was founded. And of course, it takes some of its inspiration from the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, which most people know is for recently graduated college kids. And of course, the great genius of IVC is to do the same for, you know, people later in life who actually, funny enough, may have, you know, more experience and more know-how to contribute than, you know, some 22-year-old kid. Nothing wrong with JVC. So I was a big fan, you know, from the beginning. I just thought it's one of these things you just think that is a fantastic idea. And then I got more involved in it when I started to be a reflector with a woman. I can tell you her name is Barbara. She's a former appellate judge in New York and does wonderful work. Had worked with a number of different places, and so I was and am her spiritual director. I'll tell you something funny, John. When we first started out 20, I guess like 15, 20 years ago, she said, "Boy, you look too young, to be my director," because she was older. And now she says that's not a problem. So I'd say really kind of more intensely, and then working with the IVC staff, maybe in the last 10 or 15 years. But I've always been a fan and always just thought it's an amazing idea, and it really is
Yeah.
just so clever.
Well, it's interesting when you mentioned JVC. I did JVC myself, and I was reflecting on that recently and remembering what it was like to feel like JVC was an opportunity for me to learn about what I wanted to do professionally and how I wanted to participate in service. And now working with IVC this many years later, people coming in with that knowledge and that background and that experience is a whole different way to approach this.
Yeah, and I also think, as I reflect on a lot of my friends I was in finance for 6 or 7 years, and a lot of my friends are retiring early. People are retiring earlier these days, if they can. Some people can't because they have to make ends meet. And people come to me and say, now what? What
Yeah,
can I do?
yeah,
And
yeah,
I always say IVC, and they say, this is like tailor made for me. And I think the other great thing about it is it is not like a lot of other service organizations just sort of send you out, right? I mean, as you
yeah.
know, and I'm sure you'll discuss, there's a whole program of spiritual development, accompaniment, and community. And,
Mhm.
it makes it, I think, better for people that way. Because, if you are like me, who had never done any sort of kind of one-on-one service with the poor and a not-for-profit, it's kind of overwhelming. But IVC really
Mhm.
enables you to do that by providing you with the resources to enable you to serve people.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also a piece in there that I think a lot about that has to do with identity. And when you do something for many years and you wrap your identity around who you've become in that, people figure out after retiring or after raising families that they may want to do something different with their time, but that identity piece is still very real for them, and they want to figure out how to apply it.
Yeah, and a lot of times in American culture, we say we are what we do, right? People
Mhm.
first thing people say to you is, in a party or whatever, what do you do, right?
Yeah.
And if you retire or if you're sort of underemployed or aren't working as much, that is such a key part of your identity. And if you say
Mhm.
sometimes, well, I'm not working, so therefore I'm not doing anything, so who am I?
Right.
But I mean, Ivy, of course, we're all beloved children of God, and we all have things to contribute. At the same time, I think IVC really enables people to kind of challenge all the skills that they have because
Mhm.
they want to give back.
Yeah.
It's also, I would say, for a lot of people, like in the corporate world, for example, I mean, I hate to say this. Sometimes they say it's actually more interesting.
Mhm.
It's just
How
more
so?
interesting. The work's more interesting, and just kind of
Yeah.
lively, and they really feel a sense of kind of living out a ministry too, which is also new for a lot of people. Like it's a ministry.
Yeah. I think about I've talked to people who are musicians, let's say, and it's one thing to write a song because it comes from your heart and it feeds something, and it's another thing to write one because you need to earn a paycheck and put food
Yeah.
on the table. And so having an experience where you can give back and be in service, and you're not required to fill that need, you can approach it in a different way and in a way that meets with how you're called by God to
Yeah,
serve. So,
and I also think on a even simpler level than that, I think a lot of people at the end of their careers, like I know quite a lot of attorneys, who really have
mhm,
enjoyed their career, but they're just saying like I'm kind of tired of this. I'm tired of this particular kind of work. I don't want to
mhm,
continue to keep going in and doing the same thing. And so IVC, I think, also gives people the opportunity to do something brand new, right?
mhm,
And yet it's safe,
yeah,
because it's in the church, it's supported by the Jesuits and by the whole IVC team. It's not as if you're just kind of sort of striking out on your own, and you might feel like it's a little risky, right?
mhm,
IVC, I mean, as you know, like the placements are researched, and so it's
mhm,
it's really it's just as I've always said to people, I just think And I always tell the IVC people, as many people as I can tell about this, I do, because
Mhm.
it's kind of a hidden treasure.
Yeah. Well, that is actually a good segue for us to move into the PowerPoint part of this information session. And if you wouldn't mind, there's a couple slides in there I might pitch over to you to do as far as history. And you mentioned being a reflector, and there's going to be a part for that as well. So is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And can everybody see that? Jim, can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay, I'm going to have to
Share screen.
share screen.
While you're
It
doing
is,
that, I would say I don't know anyone who's an IVC who doesn't like it, frankly.
yes. And you know what?
That's a,
I'm going to mention to Steve that I think my share screen is disabled. So that
Here
needs
we
to
go.
be put on so that I can do this piece. There we go.
So that's the downside of having someone of a certain age do it, right?
That's right.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Here we go. Okay. The Ignatian Volunteer Corps, experience making a difference. IVC, what we believe is that life experience, wisdom, and skills of senior men and women transform the world through justice rooted in gospel values, and also in this case, Ignatian values. So Jim, I'm going to kick it over to you after I run through what we're going to cover. But what we want to talk about in the next 15 minutes is the history and values and mission of IVC. We're going to fill people in on recruitment and screening and discernment, talk about what a partnership is and what placements look like, the IVC experience and spiritual support program, which I know I'm going to pitch that one over to you, Jim. We're going to look at where IVC is across the country, and then whether or not IVC is somewhere you could see yourself for the viewers today. So if you wouldn't mind, if you could talk to us a little about the history of IVC, Jim.
Yeah, so I mean, you see that on the screen. Charlie Costello and Jim Conroy, who are both very active in social justice ministries, started IVC in 1995. I don't want to sort of repeat what it says up there, but Jim was directing these seminarians at Wernersville, which was our old retreat house, and Charlie was working with Jesuit high school faculties. And as was the experience with many Jesuits, as I said there, they found that both teachers and parents of young Jesuits saw concrete ways of serving the poor. And it's funny, I'm seeing those pictures of them from a long time ago. They look different now. We run into so many people who say, boy, my kids have Jesuit training, right? And they're so excited about this, and they go on Kairos retreats, and they might do JVC after college, and there is a sense of like, what about us, right? Do you have anything for us? Is there something for us? And so that was the sort of the genesis of IVC, which was, in the best of Jesuit discernment, in response to a need, in response to a real need. So that's my sense of IVC. And truly, every Jesuit when it started said, aha, right? This is definitely going to work. So that's a little bit of a background.
Okay. And then you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So it is incorporated into the spiritual dynamic of Ignatius Loyola, who's the founder of the Jesuits, aka the Society of Jesus. It shares the same spiritual roots of Ignatius. What does that mean? So it means that the same spirituality that the Jesuits have, which comes from St. Ignatius Loyola, is embodied in IVC. And what is that spirituality? Well, the best way to describe it is a very common phrase, but also a very accurate phrase, which is finding God in all things. And that means that God is found not simply in, and there we go, finding God in all things, not simply in the church, and of course it is in the church and the sacraments in the Bible, but in every moment, which is, your relationships, certainly your ministry, but your family, nature, books, art, it's a really capacious spirituality. So that's the first charism, finding God in all things. Cor personalis is a wonderful word, which means care of the person. And I would say maybe to deepen that, care for the whole person. It's often used in terms of Jesuit education, right? Cor personalis. So we care not just for the intellectual development of the student, but also emotional, right? And spiritual as well. It's the whole person. And of course, promoting the dignity of each person. The Magus, these are all phrases beloved by Jesuits and those who work with them, our colleagues. The Magus really means, it's from the greater glory of God, which is Ignatius's motto for the Society of Jesus. It means basically the more for God, right? It doesn't mean, doing the most or working the most hours or, kind of killing yourself. It's really about, as our former Superior General Father Adolfo Nicolas said, depth, right? It's more. What more can I do for God, right?
Mhm.
How can I go the extra mile? It's a very interesting thing, that the tension between, it's not about just hours, right? And it's not about,
Right.
how many people did I see today in my IVC placement? But really, did I do more for God? Did I go deeper?
Mhm.
Did I do as much as I could? So, as a Jesuit friend of mine likes to say, it's more, not most, which is wonderful.
More
So
than
that's the
most.
Magus. Women and men for and with others. A phrase started by Father Pedro Arupe, a former Superior
Mhm.
General, now a servant of God, originally applied just for Jesuit high school students and therefore called men for others. It's a
Mhm.
very other-directed a spirituality. It really kind of encapsulates, who the Jesuits are for other people. Now, of course, it's women and men, and the sort of refinement is for and with others, right? So we're not
Mhm.
simply for them and working for them, we're with them. And as it says, giving and providing, especially for those in need. So the others are often those who are on the margins. And then, boy, these are really near and dear to my heart. The faith that does justice, which is the servant, the mission of the Society of Jesus is the promotion of faith, of which the service of faith, of which the promotion of justice is an absolute requirement. So in order to live out our faith, we have to work for a just world. Now, I know sometimes that social justice gets a bad name and people make fun of it, but it's basically working for a just society. And
Mhm.
as St. Paul VI said, if you want peace, right, you work for justice. And in that is becoming an agent of change. So these are kind of sort of overarching charisms that come from the Jesuits, but that are really lived out by
Mhm.
IVC members in different ways, and in kind of
Yeah.
different times you might stress one or the other. But they're really,
Yeah.
and nice presentation of them too. I really like
Yeah.
that presentation. Very succinct.
Thank you. And it leads nicely into the values that we hold through IVC. And in lieu of reading right through these, I'm just going to kind of touch on some points. Being with people who are on the margins, as Jim talked about, we enter communities to become part of the community with people, and it's also where we serve them. And there's an Ignatian expression that encourages us to be contemplatives in action. And what we're talking about is the service as the action. But then in IVC, what we ask people to do is we ask them to reflect privately and also with one another on where they're finding God and their meaning in what they're doing day to day. Our members have a wealth of knowledge and expertise, and it's vital to the communities that they serve. And the members are lay leaders who promote the inherent human dignity in everyone. And we seek to find God in all things and all people, as we just talked about. Our mission statement for IVC. The Ignatian Volunteer Corps, IVC, provides mature men and or women and men the opportunity to serve the needs of people experiencing poverty and marginalization, to work for a more just society, and to grow deeper in Christian faith by reflecting and praying in the Ignatian tradition. What's the IVC experience? As I mentioned before, our members are leaders of change, and they offer vital resources to organizations, churches, and schools that are working hard to support our struggling communities. When we talk about community, this includes the community we serve, and the staff members we become a part of the team where we are doing that service. We also learn from one another when we're sharing the experiences that we're having when we come together in our monthly meetings, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So how does IVC work? What we do is we match you based on your skills and your desires. And when I say skills, some people come with a skill set. Maybe it's a professional skill set. Maybe they raised families and they want to apply what they learned in those years of experience to a service position. And some people come to us and they have a desire to serve in a certain way that might not have anything to do with that. And what our directors do is they try and figure out where they're being called and help them to figure out where they're most appropriate to serve. And then we support our members through our monthly meetings. We occasionally have retreats, and we do one-on-one reflection, which Jim had referred to earlier. So what's the commitment? We ask people to commit to, we look at this two ways. We say either 1 or 2 days a week for 10 months out of the year, or 8 to 16 hours a week for 10 months out of the year. With some variation in regions, we usually serve from September to June, but we also allow there to be flexibility. If somebody is going to be around in July and August and they want to take different time, we let them work that flexibly out with their service site. And there are some people that might serve 8 hours a week and they don't do it all in one day. It doesn't have to look like a typical 8-hour workday. And the directors help people discern where their skills and their life experiences intersect with the world's need. And they commit to not just the service site, but we bring people together once a month to meet with one another, to talk about their experiences in a monthly meeting. And then there's a few of these that we usually have that are longer, they're more like a retreat day. So how is IVC different? And it's interesting because we talk a lot about what it means to be a volunteer, but most people, when they think of volunteers, they think of an opportunity. You know, maybe something is going on and they have some time to serve, and they want to go in once in a while, and that's needed and important. But what makes IVC different is that commitment that people make. They actually join the team and the staff of the service site where we place them, and they become part of that community while they're also becoming a part of the community of the people that they serve. The other thing that is different is that we take the time to explore what it is you want to do, and maybe the skill set that you've developed over your lifetime that you want to apply in service in some way. And we help figure out where God is calling you to be, depending on your life experiences. And then the spiritual reflection program that we ask people to participate in to offset and support their experience. So what do we mean by partnership? When we talk about partnership, we're talking about the nonprofits, schools, and churches that we place our IVC members in. There is an enormous need for additional support. Funding is tight in many of these places, and anybody who has done nonprofit work knows that there is more work to do than there is people to do it. And so IVC members who can join these organizations and support them in some way offset some of those critical needs, and they help them to build capacity. We will sometimes refer to these places as partnership organizations, but we also call them service sites. And so that's some of the language that we use within IVC. So IVC partners with organizations, schools, and churches that are addressing the social justice issues, either directly through charity or indirectly through structural change. And as I mentioned before, I think I mentioned this, a lot of times we ask people to do direct service, and people who are directly serving the needs of the poor and the marginalized in our communities. But there are some people who come to IVC and their skill set may have been administrative. Maybe they were a technology person, or they wrote grants and they feel like they want to be able to help in those ways. And that's stuff that we will explore with them to help them maximize the utilization of their skills. What IVC provides the members is a meaningful opportunity and to serve the needs of the people who are struggling with poverty and work for a more just society and to grow deep faith. Our members are experienced. They make a pretty big commitment. They come with ability to commit. They're reliable. I mean, one of the big things that's different between an IVC member and a standard volunteer is that they know that an IVC member is going to be there every Tuesday and Thursday on time, and they know what their assignments are. And that can be a very different thing. If you ask any volunteer coordinator, they'll say week by week they're not sure who they've got coming in to do the different things that are needed. So it's vital. Our IVC members support current programming, and they also assist the staff in the places that are our service sites. And what's interesting is that they can sometimes add to the capacity of the existing organization, but they can also start some things. Like I'm thinking of an IVC member now who is working in Catholic social services, and there are community centers all over the city. And what she does is she goes to the different centers, and sometimes she brings like arts and crafts type things that can happen there. But she also has a theater background, and she's been able to walk people through some different programs where they learn about acting and performing, and that's really meant a lot to her. And in this way, like she is sharing her professional and background experience and her life skills, and a lot of our members are doing that. This is just a list of some of the service areas and what some of the roles are like. And there's a lot of different things. Some of the examples are, there's many people who do teaching, and that can be teaching ESOL. I can think of some people that are teaching public speaking, some, high school equivalency. There's somebody who does journaling with kids. We work with people struggling with housing insecurity. There's translation services, sometimes in legal aid clinics. I know people that are doing some grant writing and some different kinds of programs. And we're going to hear from two people a little bit later that can talk about what they're doing as well. Sometimes these are roles like being a mentor or a tutor, intake coordinators, case managers, lots of different things depending on what the skill set is that the IVC member is bringing. So the spiritual support program, Jim touched on this a little bit, and I'd like for him to talk about it a little bit more because that's what the slide says.
Yeah, sure. So opening and closing retreats, that's a great picture of it. It's time for prayer and also a time for discussion to talk a little bit about the spiritual underpinnings of IVC, but also not simply didactic, but to invite you in your own prayer into a relationship with God, to see how you are being called into IVC, right? And what this means for you. But then the days of reflection are really wonderful times to sort of come away. And, as John was saying, maybe just a day or sometimes a weekend. I believe that's right. Sometimes they're longer. Is that right, John?
Yeah, it depends on the place. Yeah.
Yeah. Short period of time, people always say, boy, if I only had the time to go away on a retreat and spend time, and here it is, kind of tailor made for you, with really professional spiritual directors, monthly support meetings, which I believe are sometimes online, but sometimes in person, as John was. Is that correct, John? Sometimes online,
Yeah.
sometimes in person.
Yeah, we pivoted to almost entirely online through the pandemic, and now we're back in person. But yeah, it's been interesting.
But the one that I know the most about, I mean, I participated in some of the retreats and given reflections. And again, it's not simply the way it looks there as it's not simply you're sort of learning from this Jesuit. I mean, it's conversation. It's also prayer, which is really important. And IVC, if you don't have a sort of background in prayer, IVC will teach you. I mean, we should be blunt with that. It's not simply for that, but you'll learn how to pray as part of being in IVC. But the thing I want to sort of focus a tiny bit on is spiritual reflection, and that's what I've been doing. And it is basically what's also called spiritual direction. And so, what does a spiritual director do for you? A spiritual director helps you to find where God is active in your, excuse me, in your prayer and in your daily life. All right. So your reflector or your spiritual director will speak to you usually monthly about just where God is in your ministry, where God is in your life, and then also invite you to come to develop a life of prayer. All right. So it's hard to get into, excuse me, hard to get into right now, but we'll literally kind of help you to learn how to pray and to notice things in your prayer. So it is that kind of sort of a dualistic way of looking at things, right? On the one hand, God in your daily life, and again, particularly focused on ministry. So where am I experiencing God in my ministry? What moments sort of moved me? Where did I feel God's presence? Where did I feel God inviting me to something new? Where did I feel God challenging me? Where did I feel God consoling me? But then also in your daily prayer, where have I felt God kind of active? It's really important because, I want to say that for people who go from, say their family life or corporate life into something that is, working with people on the margins, people who are poor, it can bring up a lot of things that really need to be processed. Okay,
Yeah.
so not simply processed talking about it, which, you could do with, anyone who's a trained professional, but processed in terms of what is God saying to me here, right? I mean,
Mhm.
a lot of, one thing would be, I feel kind of at the very beginning, I feel sort of out of place. I'm not used to feeling like I don't know much, right? And
Mhm.
so, is it an invitation to humility, right?
Mhm.
I feel God's asking me to pay attention more to people who are poor, which I've never thought about. So, all these things,
Yeah.
the reflector can help you with in light of your relationship with God. So, this is the spiritual support, and I would say development program as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim.
Sure, I really love being a reflector.
So, how are we supported? We're supported in a lot of ways, but one way is financially and spiritually through generous individuals, foundations, Jesuit provinces, Jesuit communities, and also we're supported through some of our service sites. And this is a map of the United States, but this is actually a graphic that we took out of our impact report that went into America Magazine. And the reason why I'm sharing this with all of you is because it shows you many of the cities that we're located. But there's two big points that I want to make in pulling up this graphic. One is that if you're like me, the first thing that you do is you try and look to see if you're on there. Where do I live and am I on that map? But the thing to remember is that I'm going to use the city of Philadelphia as an example. Philadelphia is on here and has a region that's called Philadelphia and South Jersey. But Philadelphia, the city, is in Philadelphia County. Philadelphia County is surrounded by Delaware County, Chester County, Montgomery County, Bucks County. We work in all of those areas. So just because you see a city on this map doesn't mean that we're not extended well beyond that geographical footprint, because we have people traveling and coming from different places. And so that's one thing to remember. But the second thing, and this is a pretty big deal for us, is that we have started what we're calling the virtual program. And I think that that's been around now for about 2 years, maybe just a little bit less. It rose out of some of the work that we were doing in the pandemic. But what is exciting is that IVC is not contained to a region any longer. If you live in a part of the country that is not represented on this map, we can still offer you service opportunities. We have a group of Service Corps members that come together once a month, and they reflect and they share and they support one another in the same way that people do in person in a city where we're located. And many of them are doing virtual service, but this has allowed for us to think outside the box about people who want to be a part of IVC that don't live in one of these regions, or people that need Service Corps members and they're able to do that online. One of our biggest service sites is a place called Jesuit Worldwide Learning. And we have a handful of IVC members that are teaching refugees in camps all across the world from the comfort of their home. So it's been pretty exciting. And, we can tell you more about that. So I ask you, is IVC for you? Does the idea of community rooted in social justice, service, and spirituality apply to you? Do you have the time and ability to commit to a service partner 8 or 16 hours a week, and the willingness to reflect on that service? And are you interested in learning more about Ignatian spirituality and deepening your faith? So I am going to close this down right now, because I think this is probably the best time to introduce our other guests on the call. And I'm excited to do this. First off, after a long career in communications and journalism, Jane Seberg was looking for a volunteer opportunity that was different from the work she had done for so long. And she found that opportunity at Sanctuary Farm, an IVC partner organization in Philadelphia that operates an urban garden, farm stand, and educational center in North Philadelphia. She spends about 10 hours a week at the farm, and much of the work is hands-on, planting and caring for vegetables distributed to local residents. She also helps lead the educational programs for neighborhood school children. And she is at Sanctuary Farm with 2 other IVC members. So they're a placement that hosts 3 of our members. And Chris Kelly, who brought over 30 years of experience as a communication strategist and manager of both external and internal communications for major government agencies and elected officials, to his role post-retirement in IVC. Through IVC, Chris supported St. Anne's Center for Children, Youth and Families in Washington, D.C. in their mission to strengthen and support families, help them heal from the past, overcome barriers, and take a hold of their future. He provided communications expertise for support, allowing them to expand their reach and speak to more audiences. Jane and Chris, welcome. Thanks for being here with us. So our viewers have listened to Jim and I talk all about the program, but I think it's time for them to hear from some people who have actually experienced it.
You want me to start?
Yeah, tell us how you found IVC and what this has been like for you.
Thanks, John. It's really great to be here with everyone today. It's really, as one looks back in life, how many roads led me, I think, to this experience, maybe intentionally, but quite by chance. I am a native Midwesterner. I live about 30 miles north of Philadelphia, and I've really been blessed in my life to be part of communities of intent in parish. My husband and I really sought out communities that had a vibrant liturgy, but also a commitment to social justice. And that was certainly true in my education. And then in my work, I worked in higher ed mostly, and I had the privilege of working with a lot of Jesuit institutions and learning from afar. When we relocated to Bucks County, which is about 30 miles north of Philadelphia, it took us a long time to find a community that we really felt comfortable in to worship. And we ended up going to Old St. Joseph's in the city, in Old City. And when you know it, that the pandemic started. Didn't know many people here, had planned to retire. And as luck had it, there was a wonderful pastoral associate at Old St. Joseph who connected me to John, kind of could hear in my longing, I guess, that I really wanted to be involved in service, wanted to really have a very well-rounded retirement. I really thought about it. And I think the thing I took from the educational piece is I really wanted to continue to grow intellectually, but socially and spiritually. And so John and I had a conversation, and I had a couple of options and thought about it, and I chose Sanctuary Farm, Philadelphia. We are located in one of the poorest zip codes in North Philadelphia. Our mission is to help improve the health outcomes of our neighbors by growing and giving away free produce, but also converting vacant lots into vibrant places where they can really enjoy them, have a peaceful, safe place to be. I have to say, some days I leave there and I think I only hope and pray that I have given as much as I've gotten.
Wow.
I think the final thing I'll say is, and it tilts to the value, I think, of having a reflector, which I don't have, but I had an accidental one who really drove it home for me. Before the holidays we love to go into New York, and one of my favorite places to have reconciliation is St. Francis of Assisi by Penn Station. And I had a conversation, and to be quite frank, I struggle from time to time remaining a Catholic, but I somehow turned the conversation to being a member of IVC, and the priest asked me about it, and I talked to him about it, and I talked to him about the work with therapeutic gardening with veterans, and how one day I really had quite a deep conversation with a man who we share a lot in common in terms of faith. And at the end of the conversation with the priest said to me, "Well, Jane, I would say you're being fed the Eucharist at Sanctuary Farm." And it's true. It has fed me in ways. And I have to say, the monthly get-togethers with the fellow IVC members have been fabulous as well. It really has connected me with people like life experiences, but like importance in spirituality. And so I think that's what I'd leave you with. There are so many times when Father Jim and John were talking, I wanted to say what he said, because that's been my experience.
Thanks, Jane. How about you, Chris?
Well, thanks a lot, John. As you mentioned, I spent close to 40 years working in communications in the federal sector, and recently decided it was time to retire. And I had thought a great deal about what I wanted to do after taking a few months off. And IVC has always been in the back of my mind. My son went to Gonzaga College High School here in the District of Columbia, and was very familiar with the Jesuits there. And of course, IVC had an office there. And I did get to know a few people who were a few years ahead of me who had had very nice experiences working with IVC. So I subsequently reached out and spoke with our senior regional director, Mike Goggin, and who met with me and after I applied, and sat down with me, and we talked a little bit about what I wanted to do, which was to continue working in the communications field to bring my background and talents to an organization that would be in need. Set me up with a few interviews, and I wound up happily being matched up with St. Anne's Center for Children, Youth, and Families. And what St. Anne's does is it provides a place for young mothers who have young children to live and to recover from the traumas that they've had in their lives. They're homeless, and it gives them the opportunity to get their lives back together again, provides training for the moms, education, real life experiences, social work services and therapy. And for the children, they have a safe place to stay, to go to preschool, daycare, Head Start programs, so that by the time they come out, and their typical stay is at least a couple of years, they're able to go and manage life again on their own. But the trick about St. Anne's is that as a nonprofit, as an agency that serves the poor, they're always in need of help. And they've partnered with IVC to bring folks along to help them. And I subsequently went to work in their development office, which has been a life-changing experience for me. Working with the communications manager there, I've been able to provide press releases, outreach to the news media, interviews with staff members, interviews with residents and their families, helping to produce written articles and to sort of amplify their mission, which gives us a real opportunity to help St. Anne's receive more funds, to help them continue to do the critical mission that they take part in. So it's a real life-changing experience for me, and one that has brought me a lot of satisfaction in the work that I do. I would also like to say that the engine that really drives the machine for IVC, I think, is the spirituality side of it all. The opportunity to meet on a monthly basis with my colleagues who are volunteers at multiple agencies in the region, and to meet in a spiritual way, to reflect on Bible readings, on spiritual readings, on the works of St. Ignatius, really helps to bring everything together. In addition, we talked about, as Father Jim mentioned, about the opportunities throughout the year for days of reflection, for retreats at the beginning and at the end of the year. And I also do have a spiritual reflector that has really helped ground me and center me. And I find that to be a very rewarding experience, and one that has really changed my life. And I would certainly encourage all of you out there to apply and to become a part of this wonderful organization.
Thanks, Chris. One of the things that I'm thinking of as I'm listening to the two of you talk, oftentimes we will get people who are interested, and they'll approach and they'll say, oh, but I'm not sure about the commitment. I don't know if I can make that commitment. Did you both have some of those concerns, and how were they alleviated?
I did, in that I live 30 miles away from my site. It has been, I think, first of all, I use the time has been a blessing, because when I leave in the day, or even when I'm going, I think about what I'm prepared to do, whether it's planting, or now I'm thinking about if I'm going to see some neighbors that I've grown fond of, or when I leave, there's some difficult days too. I mean, one of my favorite people in the neighborhood is a schizophrenic. It's been really a challenge some days, but also a gift to work with her. So the other part is, I would have to say about our organization, is it is very flexible. As John said, our organizations count on us for those times, but it really, sometimes I work from home in terms of social media or things like that. And sometimes it rains. So it's in the end, the aggregate of what we've contributed, but I'd say just try it, just jump in. These are people who are loving people, by and large. I hear that from all the sites. I'd go for it.
Yeah. Thanks, Gene.
I agree, Jane. I think that whether you're interested in direct service or indirect service, like the kind of work that I've been involved with, which is bringing capacity to an office, where you're able to work with folks and they know you're reliable, you're going to be there, and you can certainly work with them when things come up and travel plans or family plans get in the way. It's certainly very easy to work with the agency, because you're a valued member of that organization that you're working with.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I just for the viewers, I'm not going to be able to get to every question. They're coming in faster than I could even read. But one person on there, and I'm going to bring you into this, Jim. I don't know that I did a good job of explaining in a concise way what a reflector is. And what popped into my mind was, it's like having a spiritual counselor, but that might be a little bit of limiting of a definition. So how would you define that for somebody?
Yeah, I think I can do it succinctly. It is a spiritual director, and that is someone who helps you to find God in your daily life and in your prayer. And so for someone who is in ministry, for example, they would go to their reflector every month or so and talk about, this is what I experienced in my ministry. This is where I felt God present. This is where I felt God moving me. Or even if you don't have that language, this is where I felt moved. And the reflector can help you see kind of God's hand in all of this. And then in your prayer, in your daily prayer, and I know that might seem sort of challenging or maybe off-putting to people, but the reflector or the director will help you to learn how to pray. And not just simply in the Ignatian way, but it's not like this is the official IVC way of praying. Everybody's smiling because they know that that's not true. It's, how do you like to pray, and what do you find helpful, and what would work in your daily life? So it really is invaluable. And as I said before, it helps to have someone to process all the things that are going through you emotionally and spiritually. So the reflector is really someone, the best word is the reflector or the director helps you to notice where God is already active in your ministry, in your IVC placement, and in your daily life.
Thank you.
John, may I add one quick thing?
Please.
In the monthly things, I find it's been a real asset with some of the sessions that we have had, knowing the ministries we serve, the speakers we've had as well, with radical listening, with vicarious trauma, And not to say that in any scary way, but there are some realities out there, and
Mhm.
those things we talk about them in a very holistic way as people of faith too.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Jane. One thing that I'm thinking, and maybe you can jump in on this one, Chris, but Jim mentioned JVC earlier, which is I did JVC. And when I was first introduced to the concept of community, that meant people you live with, period. And now as a staff person at IVC and working with folks, that definition is broadened by leaps and bounds. And so how would you identify community in terms of IVC?
I would think that for me, the community are my fellow IVC Corps members, that it's really a wonderful experience to meet with them, particularly at our monthly get-togethers and at our retreats, to exchange ideas and prayer, to be able to learn spiritually from them about their journey and what they're going through, and to just be able to accomplish the different things you want to accomplish with each other. It's really been a gratitude for me on my part. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you agree with that, Jane?
I would.
Yeah. What about the community at the farm? What would you say about that?
Well, it was interesting. The other day, the director said about two of us, the third person is new, but she said the other day, I really think of you as part of the team. I just don't think of you as a volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
But recently, not related to my farm work, I broke a toe, and all the volunteers, there are other volunteers who are at the farm. Some have been there who helped found the farm. We also have in a wide variety of backgrounds of people, but the support that I got during that as well, I thought about that the other day. I've made some good friends there, people who are equally concerned about the people in the neighborhood, people who we have grown to love one another in terms of caring about each other. Where are you? I haven't seen you today. How are you doing? And great ideas. Just very focused on the good of the place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty wonderful. The other thought that I'm having, and I think this might just be a thought rather than a question, but it wasn't that long ago that I was part of a former Jesuit volunteer retreat in the Mid-Atlantic. And there were people from up and down the Eastern Seaboard that came. And mostly we didn't know one another. But I think those of us who are enmeshed in Ignatian values have a common language, I would say. And I think that there is aspects of that can connect us in community. Some nods. You guys would agree with that?
Yeah, I was thinking I'll just give you an example. So I help to lead pilgrimages to the Holy Land and other places, and people are often surprised that it's more than just a tour. People are really of the same mind, right? And I think it's more than kind of working. It's more than working in a business, because people have the same goal, which is to serve God, to be with one another, to deepen one's relationship with God. So to your point, John, there's already a lot of community built in. It's
Right.
not throwing people who are coming at this thing they're coming from different places, but they have the same goal, which is to serve
Right.
God. So that means there's a lot of commonality, and a lot of the sort of awkwardness of being around people who you might not know initially is kind of removed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well put. Well put.
The support that IVC provides us is wonderful.
Yeah.
All around. It's really nice.
Yeah. Good. Well, I just want to take this moment to thank everyone. Jane and Chris, thank you for coming on and sharing your experiences as members. And Jim, I can't thank you enough for coming on and for the support that you've given us over, I think you said 10 to 15 years. But for this to be the first time that we're doing a national information session and to have you with us is pretty fantastic. So
a pleasure, a real pleasure. I love IVC.
Yeah, and I want to thank all the viewers. For those of you who are on, it's a very interesting experience. I know there's all these people watching and we can't see you, but we feel your presence. And I'm going to be following up with everybody within the next couple of days with a follow-up email that will probably have a recording of this, but also provide you with some next steps. Because we would love to hear from you, and we would love to have you join us. So with that, I'm going to end. Thank you again, everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks. God bless.
Thank you.